This is you, sipping overpriced coffee in a climate-controlled room, scrolling through videos about survival, while the closest thing you fought this week was a jammed printer. Now backtrack, past your parents, grandparents, and the whole chain of holiday photo people you never met. Keep going until you hit one very nervous individual crouched in the dirt, holding a stick that may or may not count as a weapon. That guy, that's your ancestor. He has no name, no shoes, and no idea that you, a distant descendant with Wi-Fi anxiety, even exist. But here's the thing, if that guy, or anyone in your ancestral line, had starved, frozen, drowned, or been clubbed into a fine paste, you wouldn't be here. You're not here because you're special. You're here because generation after generation of desperate humans got lucky, stayed stubborn, and didn't die when they probably should have. Which brings us to the ugly truth. History is basically one long highlight reel of humanity breeding like rabbits until nature slammed the reset button. So let's take a look at how close you and your ancestors came over and over again to being permanently deleted. We're going to rank 5 times your bloodline was squeezed through population bottlenecks, natural disasters, plagues, and collapses, and somehow crawled out the other side. The scale? From mildly character building to start digging your own grave levels of bad. Let's get right into it. 5. The Toba Supervolcano eruption, approximately 74,000 years ago. Roughly 74,000 years ago, on the island of Sumatra, the Toba Supervolcano erupted with a force humanity has never witnessed since. It ejected about 2,800 cubic kilometers of volcanic material, enough to bury entire countries. Ash clouds blotted out the sun, lowering global temperatures by as much as 3 to 5 degrees Celsius for several years. Glaciers expanded, monsoons collapsed, and ecosystems from Africa to India withered. Genetic studies suggest that the global human population may have dropped to as few as 3,000 to 10,000 individuals, a near-extinction bottleneck. Imagine Earth itself switching to hard mode, where crops refuse to grow and hunting grounds emptied. And now you're there. Your entire world is a grey sky, and the air tastes like sandpaper. The plants your group normally gathers? Gone. Animals? Starving too. Your choices: choke on the ash soup or gnaw on old leather. Fire won't light, food won't grow, and if someone sneezes, congratulations, the whole camp is dead. Somehow, your ancestors didn't die in this ash-soaked nightmare. They hunted smarter, moved farther, and outstubborned extinction. The end result? You get to complain about slow internet. 4. The Black Death, 1347 to 1351. Mid-14th century Europe, Asia, and North Africa were thriving. Cities bustling, trade routes buzzing. Then came Yersinia pestis, hitching rides on fleas, rats, and human stupidity. Between 1347 and 1351, the plague killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people, wiping out up to half the population in some regions. In cities like Florence, bodies piled faster than gravediggers could bury them. Entire villages vanished. Streets reeked of rot and smoke from plague fires. Now drop yourself into that scene. You're coughing, your neighbor's coughing, and the air is basically one giant germ buffet. Family members vanish overnight. Priests are dying faster than they can hand out blessings. The town doctor tells you to carry herbs and pray harder. Spoiler, it doesn't work. Meanwhile, if you even look at a rat, you're done. Yet somehow, your ancestors pulled through. Maybe they lived in an isolated village. Maybe they had just enough luck in their immune system. Either way, the plague killed half the continent, and your bloodline still made it. Silver lining, wages for survivors went up because half the workforce was suddenly fertilizer. 3. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317. Before the plague, Europe already had a warm-up disaster, the Great Famine. Triggered by relentless rains, crop failures, and a cooling climate known as the Little Ice Age, the famine stretched from 1315 to 1317. Grain rotted in fields, livestock drowned in mud, and food prices tripled. Some chronicles describe people boiling leather shoes for soup or eating cats, dogs, and worse. Mortality estimates run into the millions across northern Europe. And yes, you're there too. Picture rain hammering your thatched roof day and night. Your grain stockpile is mold with a side of more mold. You're staring at your cow not as livestock, but as dinner with legs. Parents abandon children. Children abandon parents. In some towns, gallows stand not just for criminals, but for desperate food thieves. The famine eventually eased as weather stabilized, but it left a malnourished, weakened population. Perfect timing, because just a few decades later, the Black Death would stroll in. Congratulations, survival was a relay race of suffering. 2. The Columbian exchange pandemics, 16th to 17th centuries. When Europeans stumbled into the Americas, they brought more than guns and greed. They brought smallpox, measles, influenza, and other old world diseases to populations with zero immunity. The impact was catastrophic. Estimates suggest up to 90% of indigenous peoples across the Americas died within a century. Cities like Tenochtitlan went from hundreds of thousands of inhabitants to hushed ruins. Entire cultures collapsed under epidemics that tore through faster than any army. Drop yourself in that nightmare. You're part of a thriving community one week, and the next, half your neighbors are covered in pustules. Healers have no answers. Ceremonial leaders die. Farmers die. Soldiers die. You're left in silence, staring at abandoned fields and villages. Death isn't just common, it's the only constant. The aftermath was world-shattering. Societies weakened, empires crumbled, and Europeans exploited the devastation. Your ancestors, whichever side of the globe they stood on, either endured the disease storm or benefited from it. Either way, survival meant watching civilizations vanish like smoke. 1. The 1918 influenza pandemic. The First World War had already left tens of millions dead. But in 1918, another killer arrived, the H1N1 influenza virus. It spread in waves from military camps to every corner of the globe, infecting a third of the world's population. Unlike typical flu, this strain killed the young and healthy with terrifying efficiency, often within days, lungs filled with fluid until victims essentially drowned from the inside. Death toll estimates range from 50 to 100 million. Cities enforced mask mandates, morgues overflowed, and coffins ran short. Now it's your turn again. Imagine coughing up blood in a hospital crammed with bodies. Nurses are collapsing, doctors are overwhelmed, and the man in the bed next to you has just stopped breathing. The government tells you to avoid crowds, but factories keep running. Even the graveyards are full, so they start stacking coffins in the street. Yet your bloodline made it. Maybe your ancestors caught it and survived, or maybe they got lucky and dodged it. Either way, the flu burned through entire families and your lineage didn't get erased. Congratulations. Your ancestors won a survival lottery where the prize was continued existence. Closing. So here you are, alive, caffeinated, scrolling, cushioned by centuries of other people's misery. You exist not because humanity was wise, but because your ancestors stubbornly refused to stay dead, even when nature was actively trying to scrub them off the planet. Every plague, every famine, every eruption was basically nature asking, "Are you sure you want to exist?" And your ancestors screaming back, "Hell yes!" And that's zero why you're here. Not special, just lucky. So maybe finish your coffee and say thanks to every half-starved, ash-choked, plague-ridden survivor in your bloodline. Because honestly, you should have been extinct ages ago.